Welcome. Are you ready for another epic tale of sword and sorcery? Well, the good people of Savage Realms Monthly are proud to offer you this story from celebrated author Toni Sweeney, as it appeared in our November 2021 issue. You can find all of our issues on Amazon. If you love adventure, do yourself a favor and pick up a copy. For that matter, pick them all up. We won't mind. And now, Victory for the Hawk by Toni Sweeney, narrated by Moose Matson. We hope you like it. Victory is yours, O Chief, if you are willing to pay the price. Once again my sons have come to me, asking, "Where did you come from, father? The elders say you're an outlander and not one of our own. Where's your home?" 'Tis all I can do to keep from laughing. "Foolish children," I want to shout. "I've lived 20 of my life in this land. How long must I stay here before I'm no longer a foreigner?" Then I see my lady wife shrug and smile slightly, and know she's remembering the day I rode into their village, a young but battle-weary warrior. How I looked into her eyes and knew my wandering was done. She's never spoken of it, sensing the memories are painful, and she has no wish to awaken them in my heart, though that far-off time holds no shame for me. Now, however, she places a hand on my shoulder and says gently, "I think, Garrett, 'tis time." So perhaps it is. Now that my sons are fully man-grown, maybe 'tis time they learn their sire's story. Time to tell them of their grandsire and his tormented kinsman, of a combat won and lost, and how it altered a country's life forever, and transformed a child into a man. To this purpose I've summoned my scribe, that his educated fingers may set down those events in my own words. So not only my sons but others will know of 2 brave and valiant men, and what happened on a beach in far-away Cymene, called by our enemies Cymru, now renamed Cambria by those in my new homeland. Chapter 1. I remember well the day Lord Cymric led his men into battle against the invaders from the sea. Though 'tis now many years agone, and other memories are veiled and dim, that one day stands clear and sharp in my mind. For what came about then changed not only our people's lives, but my own forever. I can still see how the late sunlight cast long shadows on the men as they gathered wood, binding it together into faggots for the funeral pyre. A short distance away sat my kinsman, alone as always, hunched inside the shelter of his cloak, watching them. His stance was of one in pain, and as the wind blew the garment away from his body, white bindings across his rib-cage gave evidence of broken bones and a deep sword cut in his side. A shadow fell across his own. "We've enough wood." Thornhild, our war chief's second in command, spoke quietly. "The funerary ceremony can begin." He walked away as my kinsman nodded, still without speaking. Under his cape, one hand went to his side, nursing broken ribs. He couldn't move quickly. To do so might start the wounds to bleeding again. If not for them, he too would be helping the men. He brushed aside my hand as I offered it, standing under his own strength, as stubborn and brave as my lord had been. 'Twas just as well. We both needed time to think on what had happened the previous day, and why. The beach had been grey in the early dawning, the sky above it the same colour, sea and heaven merging into a single surging mass, broken only by the white waves striking the shore. I feared the great ocean, though my lord often laughed at my fright. Nevertheless, 'twas from there our enemies had come. Unlike the fine white beaches of the western shore, our islands had their own unique soil, and Simeon's coastline was coarse and rocky, and littered with boulders. Surrounding the beach, ragged, flat-topped cliffs made the narrow path gouged out of the rock the only passage to the sea. 'Twas a scant month now since the crimson star burst like a bleeding eye through the heavens, bringing with it the Droon priest's dire predictions, most of which had already come to pass, to their own justification. Within a week the long ships of the Nords were sighted off the coast, and though no one saw them land, abruptly they were ashore. The inhabitants of the first village they attacked swore their huts burst into flame of their own accord, the sea rovers slaying those escaping with bolts of lightning thrown from their fingertips. From the other two villages there were no survivors, and thus no one to confirm this story. One thing only was certain: Simene was now in invaders' hands. A fortnight before their leader issued a challenge, brought by a smirking messenger. It was insulting in its brevity. To Cymric, chief of the clan Hawk, and war chief of the Simeons. I need no magic to help me conquer this little kingdom. I bring only my sword to the sands of fire. Fight me there in single combat, if you dare. What he did not say was understood. The victor would gain possession of the isles, the loser's men bowing their necks to the victor's sword. My lord had no choice but to agree, asking our kinsman Bryn Aaron to accompany him. Bryn Aaron was the son of a warrior who had left Simene some 25 years before, after taking it into his head to sell his sword into the service of the ruler of the lands on the far side of the fathomless channel. He was disliked and distrusted by many, I among them, and for good reason. He was left-handed. Everyone knew a man using his left hand better than his right was demon-touched. Also, he appeared shortly after the Crimson Star exploded into the sky. 'Twas his misfortune, he told us, to be cursed to follow that star. He'd angered the gods of the mainland, and his punishment was to follow the Crimson Star, until it led him to his penance. Here once more among his own people, perhaps, in this very confrontation, he hoped his quest might end. Perhaps he deserved his punishment, did Bryn Aaron, but he was a noble and brave warrior. Now I see I much maligned him with my childish distrust. He and Cymric set their horses on the path leading to the shore. I rode with them, following behind Cymric's black charger. There was no real need. My lord was already armed, but as his squire 'twas my duty. As his son, though I was ill-begot, 'twas my right, and I felt pride that day as I studied my father's strong shoulders as he rode before me. On the beach below us waited a lone horseman, Edelwulf, the invader, regarding the approaching riders impassively. His only movement was the fluttering of his cloak as the wind lifted one edge, revealing gleaming mail beneath the thick cloth. Behind him on the cliffs to the west his men waited. Across on the eastern slopes, protecting the shore, Cymric's men did the same, all watching as the two black chargers bearing their armoured riders picked their way down the slope. In appearance, my lord and our kinsman were much alike, being both fair but sun-touched, with smoky amber eyes like those of a cat or a bird of prey, like the eyes of the hawk on Cymric's banner and painted upon his shield. Cymric's wheat-gilded hair was held back from his face by a woven war-chief's band, but in Erin's bound in a braid down his back, but from a distance they were identical. I resembled neither. Still my lord acknowledged me as his own. Together before sunrise they consulted the augury of the Druun priest, who performed the proper rituals: sacrifice, sacred fire, inhaling of herb-laden smoke, then mouthed obscure pronouncements. The demon hand will hold back the hawk. The dead will wound the living. Victory is yours, O chief, if you are willing to pay the price. Afterwards Bryn looked into my father's face and found it tight with anger. "What did it mean, Cymric?" My lord's voice was clipped as he answered. "Dead killing the living, demon hands, who knows? I dislike such mummery. I ask it only for my men's sake. They fight better if they believe themselves assured of victory." 'Twas one thing he'd always believed, what he called the jiggery-pokery of religion, though he mostly kept his thoughts to himself, speaking them only to me, knowing I'd never tell. I myself felt one day the gods might punish him for his ridicule, but I also never spoke that aloud. "The demon, he meant me, didn't he?" Bryn persisted. He knew well the others' feelings for him. "The priest was probably drunk on mead," Cymric retorted, "to ensure his words were properly confused." "No, 'twas something more," Bryn insisted. Cymric's look was pitying. "Surely you don't believe in such stagery as this?" His tone held scorn. The sun was rising, sending a faint glowing arc against the horizon as he gathered his reins. The first rays of the sun burst over the barrier of the ocean, touching him with fiery fingers, burnishing the fair hair to copper and reflecting in the wild amber eyes. In that moment, to me, he looked like some angry and avenging god, ready to brave demons to protect his family. "Don't, Cymric, don't mock your gods. 'Tis how I came to be as I am." The priest's ramblings disquieted Bryn more than he wished to admit. He felt something evil was about to happen, in spite of the promise of victory. My lord's only answer was a snort of disgust as he swung into the saddle, beckoned to me to follow, and rode away with Bryn close behind. As they reached the beach with its deadly soil, he stopped his horse. We drew rein beside him. Chapter 2. The Sands of Fire was a place accursed, ensorcelled by an angry mage who'd been given a pledge by a long-ago king, and then had that promise broken. It was friendly to neither defender nor invader. The wizard cursed the shore with deadly fire. The beach looked harmless, the coastline serene and quiet, but anyone setting foot upon it would find himself, without warning, surrounded by flames bursting from the sand. In a way, the sands protected northern Cymene by keeping invaders out, but many of our people had also perished there. Many a hapless traveller, losing his way, died on the sands, transformed to ash by the wizard's merciless fire. "This is as far as you can go with me," Cymric announced. "Stay here. Watch. Keep this fight a fair one." He looked at me, knowing I'd protest. "No arguments, boy. You'll obey. I stayed silent. Surprisingly, 'twas Bryn who argued. "Let me take your place. You're too valuable to risk. We're enough alike. The Nord will never know." He got a look of anger, as if he'd insulted my father. "He won't, but I will. All would think me coward if I let another fight in my place." He glanced at me, love in the golden eyes. "Could I face this one again if I did so?" Bowing his head, Bryn silently accepted his answer and looked toward the cliffs. As if stepping out of the mist enshrouding the shore, a figure appeared on a ledge overlooking the water, robes streaming, mantle whipped by the wind. In the man's hand was a gilded staff, upon its tip a triangle encompassed by a golden circle. He raised it to catch and hold the rays of the awakening sun, sending beams of fire glittering outward. Bryn caught his cousin's arm, and Cymric followed his gaze, exclaiming sharply as he recognized both the staff and the gesture. "A dragon priest, to watch us, no doubt." He looked at our kinsman, golden eyes narrowing. "Edelwulf trusts me no more than I trust him. 'Tis like a dishonourable Nord to believe there's only treachery in others. Do you think he'll use magic?" The Nords were notorious for their knowledge of the black arts, though they rarely used it, reputation being enough to cower most. "He swore he wouldn't, but if I win, who knows?" My lord shrugged as his hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "Either way, 'twill be a bloody fight, I fear." The look he gave his kinsman held both irony and sadness. "Still, the priest said victory at a price, and I plan to pay it whatever the cost. Wait for me, cousin." Kicked by angry heels, the black horse leaped forward. As its hoofs touched the sand, the beach began to blacken and crumble, a fiery wall leaping from the shriveling soil. Cymric's horse screamed and tried to bolt. Only the strength of his hands made it stand and face the fire. It danced nervously in one spot, hooves beating an unsteady tattoo on the sand. Before I could speak, Bryn disobeyed my lord's orders. He touched heels to his own horse's sides, and it galloped onto the beach. Immediately a second ring of fire rose, coiling and encircling him within a curve of flames. I stayed where I was, obedient, frightened, knowing there was nothing I could do, fearing the worst for both of them. Bryn looked at him helplessly. There was no way he could get through the sheet of fire, should he be needed. My lord was separated from him as if he were alone. Above the crackling of the fire came a shout. "Nord, dog! You think to see Simeons die today! You'll see them fight first!" Cymric was but feet from the dragon's leader when the third circle appeared, leaping up to surround Edelwulf. He was caught between the barrier protecting his enemy and the one imprisoning our cousin. He could neither attack nor retreat. The fire hissed and crackled as if the earth beneath it were being consumed. It spat out solid droplets, which splattered and burst into glowing coals. A shower of liquid flame sprayed rider and horse. One spark struck the animal's neck, sizzling as it seared the glossy black hide. It screamed in pain and reared, legs flailing the air as it tried to escape the fire, while its rider forced it forward. I clutched my horse's reins and wanted to weep, but didn't dare let the tears fall. A son must not shame his father by showing fear. Cymric struck its flank with the flat of his sword, and the creature desperately leaped through the flames. The fire surrounding both him and Edelwulf disappeared. Encouraged, Bryn pushed his own horse through the fiery barrier, and the flames extinguished in the single blinking of an eye. Was that part of the enchantment placed on the coast an illusion, vanquished by my father's bravery? Whatever the reason, the flames did not reappear. As if belatedly remembering my father's command, Bryn pulled his horse to a halt. With a yell, Edelwulf raised his sword, blocking the blow Cymric aimed at him. For a moment they swayed together, the two blades locked, so close their horses touched, straining chest against chest, hooves churning the sand. Cymric dropped his reins, raising his shield. It thwarted the downward slash of the Nord's sword that tore open the emblazoned hawk's breast. The sound of metal biting into metal echoed off the cliff tops. Edelwulf lifted his own shield to ward away a second blow. All heard the sounds of my lord's sword as it struck the shield, the blade, and something softer. Blood spurted from the sea rover's shoulder as Cymric's sword flashed. It glittered in the air, splashing onto his horse's neck and splattering the dragon's shield, as his upflung arm slung crimson spray from the blade. Cymric hurled himself from the saddle, striking Edelwulf's body with his own. Both men toppled to the ground. Cymric was the first to scramble to his feet, grasping his sword in both hands. He raised the weapon above his head as he staggered towards his fallen enemy. On the cliff, the priest lifted his staff. Bryn, fearing some trickery, galloped toward the two figures in frantic haste. Edelwulf rolled away, reached for his own sword, but even as his groping fingers clutched at the hilt, Cymric's blade slashed down with all his strength behind it. It struck the Nord in the neck, traveling through. The headless body fell backward, blood gushing from the severed trunk to soak the grey sand. Cymric drove the blade into the dirt, leaning upon it warily as he raised a hand to his eyes. Bryn was off his horse, running toward him. Relieved, still fearful, I stayed in the beach grass, waiting for his call. Cymric looked up. He was breathing heavily, mailed shoulders heaving. "Edelwulf's men," he panted. "Get mounted. If I know the Nord, there's treachery to come. No matter what their leader swore, they'll not give up this easily." A shout from the western cliffs broke through his words. In a dark rush, warriors streamed down the slope, running toward them, battle cries breaking from the invaders' throats. The sound of Cymric's own men rose to meet them, echoed by a high-pitched keening above their heads. Cronhild's archers had been ready, and the first Nord fell as the arrows found their targets. Cymric and Bryn were swept into the wave pouring down the hill. Amid a mass of clashing metal and armoured bodies, the bands met in the centre of the beach. In the confusion, the priest in his position upon the ledge was forgotten, as Bryn whirled to drive his sword through a Nord's chest, feeling it enter and sever his enemy's spine. He saw the holy man raise his hands and turn toward the water, calling above the din, "Come to us, dragon of the sea! Your son has failed. His word no longer binds us. Come, protect your brood!" The wind whirled above their heads, capturing the words and tossing them at the ocean. It swooped, caught the water, swirling it upward into a great wave, and the sea began to churn. Great bubbles erupted into the air. The grey waves rose higher and higher, becoming a steel-coloured waterspout, roiling as though something were trying to escape from beneath the water's surface. With a crash, the waves exploded, falling to reunite with the swirling sea in a sheet of grey spume. Above the foam rose a flattened head, fanged and serpentine, atop a long and sinuous neck. It opened its jaws, and a roar rolled from its throat, hovering above the sound of the battle. A cry of fear burst from me at the awesome sight. I couldn't stifle it. I fought the reins to keep my horse from bolting. For an instant, men on both sides were stunned into inaction as the great beast lumbered from the water, its thrashing legs sending waves splashing onto the shore. It screamed again, scarlet tongue curling as one giant paw lowered itself into the mass of men. Warriors scattered, but not before several were caught beneath the claws and trampled as bloody pulp in the sand. The cliffs held its screams, hurling them back at the men. The Simians now had two foes, the Nord and their guardian, the dragon from the sea. Its spike-tipped tail curved, wrapped around the warrior, and lifted him off the ground. He struggled helplessly, slashing at the plated hide with his sword before being tossed over their heads into the water. Striking and dodging, Cymric and Bryn were between the beast's front paws as the dragon's head lunged and snapped. Its mouth drooled burning drops upon the sand, splattering them with fire. The creature screamed once more, capturing another warrior between its jaws, and the men turned their fear and anger upon the priest high upon his cliff perch. "The priest! Kill the priest!" came the cry. "No!" immediately Bryn shouted. "'Tis against the gods! Command to slay a holy man! Don't!" But the order had already been given. The sky darkened as arrows launched upward. Certain of their success, the priest was caught unprotected. He went down, a dozen wooden shafts protruding from his body. But the dragon didn't disappear. The priest hadn't created the creature. He'd merely summoned it, falling back on his magic once the unthinkable, the defeat of their leader, had happened. Head darting snake-like to fall and strike, the beast lumbered onward, snatching up men and dashing them upon the sand, where they lay like disjointed dolls. Its tail lashed from side to side, raking the beach with blood and bodies. My lord was before it now, aiming for the tongue with his sword, slashing at the sinuous mass of flesh curling above him. "Oh, gods, that I might ever be so brave." The dragon roared again, its scarlet-toothed maw hovering above our war chief. A rain of arrows struck its head. 6 points buried themselves in one eye, bursting the slitted iris, making it bleed blackly. More shafts entered the open mouth, lodging in its narrow throat. Wobbling in pain, the great head slung back and forth in an effort to tear loose the arrows. It reared backward on weakened hind legs, front claws tearing the air. The heavy scaled body stiffened, then toppled like a felled tree. Cymric turned to run from the dying beast. A fallen warrior lay before him, and he tripped over the body, sprawling in the sand. Still gripping his sword, he rolled onto his back, and the huge body descended. "Cymric!" Bryn's cry was lost in the crash of the great beast striking the sand. My own shrilled an echo. "God, no!" Dust filled the air, hiding the creature from sight. Bryn was running toward it before the cloud began to settle. I threw myself from my horse's back, rushing after him, dodging swords and lances. I'd screamed the name I'd never been allowed to speak. "Father!" The sea beast was unmoving, but under its claws lay the war chief of Sweeney. Chapter 3. Unmindful of those fighting around him, Bryn tossed his sword aside and fell to his knees, attempting to lift the giant paw. One of the dragon's spurs had caught Cymric under the breastbone, the thrust of its fall driving the curved claw into his chest. As Bryn seized the heavy spur, Cymric's hand came up to catch his wrist. Bryn immediately clasped it within his own. I reached them in time to hear his words. "Don't!" The sound jerked out in a pain-filled grunt. "Cymric, sweet gods, don't, not yet." The effort of speaking brought bloody froth to his pale mouth. When another word came, it was a slow and painful gasp. "Wait until after. Don't let me journey to the afterworld with a dragon's claw in my guts." The grip on Bryn's hand was so tight, I saw him wince. "'Tis dark." Cymric's eyes were open, though the glaze of dying was fast upon them. "Has the sun fallen? We can't fight in the dark." "Nay, 'tis still daylight." Bryn was forcing his voice to be steady. Great control had our kinsman, though he rarely exercised it. "Then 'tis almost done. Promise me one thing." "Anything I can, cousin." "My sword." He raised his right hand. It still held the sword, grasped tightly in his fist. "See that my son gets it." His son, but not me. Though I cared not for that. What was a sword? What was a kingdom when I was losing my sire? "Take your sword." Bryn was shocked. "You can't go to the afterworld unarmed. Let the lords of the Great Hall see that a Simeon doesn't fear death. I'll go unarmed, Bryn." He began to cough, blood lacing his chin, splattering on the hawk's amulet around his neck. "My woman." "Don't talk." "You talk is all I have left now. I wish I'd known you longer, cousin. We would have shown this country a thing or two." Cymric's eyes closed, and he didn't speak for so long we both grew fearful. I felt my cheeks wet, but didn't realize I wept. Only the tightness of the hand in Bryn's grasp told us he still lived. Once more he opened his eyes. He looked at me, quietly and sadly, and I snuffled away my misery and forced myself to return his gaze without mewling. "No tears, boy. Make me proud. Never forget my blood's in your veins." To Bryn he whispered, "Your demon hand has held me back this long, Bryn Arden. Now you must let me go. Loose your hand." Reluctantly, Bryn obeyed. He pulled his left hand free of Cymric's grasp. With a bare intake of breath, my lord lay still. The dragon, though dead, had killed Heartchafe. Bryn bowed his head, pressing his forehead against his bent knee, willing the stinging tears in his eyes not to fall. My own eyes were now dry, my own tears already shed. Abruptly and determinedly, Bryn looked up, wrapping his arms around the massive claw. I moved to help him, but he waved me away. Bryn Erin's arms tightened and heaved. The claw came loose with bits of broken mail clinging to it, the deadly curved end glistening with Cymric's life blood. He dropped the heavy spur into the sand, untied his cape, and spread it over his cousin's body. So intent were we in his task, neither of us saw the slight twitch of the beast's tail, nor heard the faint rustle as it raised itself. He was bending to retrieve his sword when the tail slithered around him, lifting him into the air. The beast was dying, but there was still enough strength for its tail, like the body of a snake, to constrict about him, weakly slinging its captive. I was tossed aside as I clawed at its scales. Above me I could hear Bryn Erin gasping for breath. The coil tightened. A rib snapped, sharp and loud above the battle noise. Bryn was lifted higher, dangling above the head, its left eye a-bristle with the projecting arrow ends. Hearing my shouts, the men turned from the battle to once more attack the creature. Bryn raised his sword, and with a final cry of rage and despair, hurled it at the untouched eye. It sank to the hilt into the oblique orb. With a bellow of mortal pain, the dragon stiffened, its tail uncoiling to release its captive, as the creature crashed to the ground in a final spasm. As he fell, Bryn twisted in mid-air to land on his feet. Too late, he saw the upraised sword still clutched in my lord's dead hand. It rushed upward to meet him. There was an explosion of pain in his side as he fell upon the sword. His next memory, he told me, was of a face floating above him. "You've awakened at last. I thought they'd get a chance to bury you, too." "Bury who?" He tried to sit up, was rewarded by a stab of fire through his side, and the sudden sensation of suffocation, as if all the air had rushed out of his lungs. Firm hands forced him down again. "The chief of the Clan Hawk is being buried today." "Cymric, I had hoped that was merely a ride on the nightmare. I must go." It hurt to talk, but with slow, shallow breaths he succeeded. "Get up now and you'll start bleeding again. I've only just successfully staunched that wound." The man's voice was a concerned grumble. "Used nearly a pound of spiderweb to do it, too." "You're a leech." "Aye, the only one hereabouts. Kept very busy this past day, tending to those who survived, and there were a goodly many." Taking a deep and painful breath, Bryn sat up. Bright lights danced in his head, and his chest burned, but he threw back the blanket and attempted to stand. "My clothes, leech. I must attend the funeral of my kinsman." "If you ride slowly, you may survive." The physician saw the folly in arguing. "Whatever happens, 'twill be on your own head." He turned toward the door. "I'll fetch your garments." With aid, Bryn dressed, hiding the pain with a grimace of effort. He mounted the black horse and rode away. All this Bryn Erin told me when he returned to camp, for I was not allowed in his presence while the leech attended him. I believed him, for he was always a truthful man. I myself was busy with the task of mourning and healing my own pain. Now 'twas time to begin. Wrapping his cloak about him, Bryn joined Hronhild at the cliff's edge. They had placed my lord's body upon a bed of stones, raised like an altar above the grey and rocky earth. Around the base of the stones, faggots gathered by the men and soaked in candle wax had been stacked. The deeply dented hawk-blazoned shield rested upon Cymric's chest, hiding the wound from our sight. The golden brow band was gone, removed by Hronhild, to be taken to his son. A child, much younger than I, an infant who would now be chief in our father's stead. Across his chest, atop the shield, lay the sheathed broadsword. Bryn stepped forward and lifted the sword, wrapping the leather belt around the scabbard. He knelt, pressed his mouth to Cymric's cold lips, then straightened and backed away from the bier, nodding to Hronhild. Hronhild pushed me forward to perform my first and only act as eldest son. I held out my torch, touching it to one of the bundles. As it sputtered and flared, licking greedily at the paraffin-soaked sticks, the others one by one moved to the bier, each setting his own flame to the wood. The fire spread around the stones until the body was enclosed in a circle of light. A breeze blew off the ocean, ruffling the fair hair, lifting it off the bloodless forehead. It grew in intensity until the blaze, fanned by the wind, roared higher in the smoke, and the flames hid our dead chief's body from our eyes. I will not remember him that way, but as he was that morning on the beach, with the sun in his eyes, touching his hair with light. That lives in my mind's eye. Though other scenes grow hazy and confused, that one is clear. 'Twill always be the way I see my father. Afterward, when the fire had died and nothing but smouldering coals and a few charred bones remained, the soldiers covered the ashes with stones, completing Cymric's cairn. Cymene was saved. Bereft of their leader and their guardian dragon, the Nords quickly succumbed. Cymene was saved. Victory, O chief, if you are willing to pay the price. Cymene was saved, and I, already half orphaned, had lost my sire. Above it all, the crimson star burned steadily, glowing balefully upon us. As the sun began to wane, it began to drift away from Cymene. Chapter 6. At dawn, Bryn left the encampment. Hronhild asked him to stay, to lead the others until my half-brother grew to manhood, but he refused, saying the sub-chief himself was the man for that. He knew now his destiny had not been secured, and he must, once again, travel after that unwavering light. "What awaits you here, boy?" He smiled at me as he said it, and held out his hand. "Why not come with me? Let us meet our fates elsewhere." I admit I was willing and eager to escape my grief, so I agreed. Perhaps 'twas what my father would have wished. Perhaps it was the way I would one day make him proud. The forgiveness and peace Bryn hoped for hadn't been found, and his destiny floated away from him, beckoning to us both with that unrelenting but brilliant red glow. First, however, he had a promise to keep. We found the farmhouse, a modest dwelling for a chief. We rode past the fields Cymric would never see again, and stopped our horses at the edge of the yard. She had seen him coming and ran clumsily to meet him. She was barefoot, big with child, a toddler clutching at her skirts. I hadn't known she was so young. He swung down from his horse and stood by it, waiting, making no move to go to her. As she neared, she saw her mistake. knew him to be a stranger, and hesitated, uncertain whether to continue or run back to the shelter of the cottage. Without speaking, he held out the sword, and just as silently she looked from it to his face, and took it, pressing it to her breast. Once again, the grief rose within me, though I couldn't speak to her nor to anyone of it. Something more than just a husband or a father had been lost. Our land had lost its protector. He held her in his arms, comforting her, letting her shed the tears neither of us were able. He could have stayed, taken my lord's place. He was enough like my father that in time she would have forgotten. But the crimson star gleamed unfeelingly above us. He left her clutching the sword, a dead husband's kiss upon her lips, a dead man's child in her belly. 'Twould be many years before Bryn Aaron expiated his sins, and I'd be man-grown when it happened. I counted myself fortunate to be there as witness, though at that moment neither of us knew where the star would lead. I survived peace times and war, saw the rise of reason and the fall of magic. I think my father would have been proud of how I acquitted myself through it all. Bryn Aaron and I rode north, and the crimson star shone coldly before us. The end.